Hey, Razzballers, what's going up? It's Nick. It is Tuesday, May 13th, and here's your first advisory notice. This is a football show today. That's right. JayWrong is going to be joining me, and we are talking nothing but fantasy NFL stuff that's happened, some offseason stuff, as well as some of the news and notes from the draft that just happened. So if you are only interested in fantasy baseball, shut this off or just mute it and let it play in the background. I'd appreciate that. Thanks very much. So obviously we have Jay is our main football fellow over at Razzball Football. So without further ado, here he is, Mr. Hanson Pants himself. Hey Jay, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. Enjoying, well, not really enjoying. I guess that would be the opposite word I would describe. But the weather out here. I'm not sure if you've been to the Mid-Atlantic, but when spring ends and summer begins, it becomes this one big mess of conflagration and thigh sweat, and I'm not really enjoying it. So
Why did you move from California to Washington?
yeah, says the guy who moved to Arizona.
Yeah, because it's warm.
Yeah, it's I've been to Arizona. It's a little too warm, a little too dry for me. But no, the springs here are just lovely.
Yeah.
And it's actually it reminds me a lot of Seattle's summers, which I lived there for a while. But the only problem is the springs here last for about 2 days, and then it's thunderstorms and rashes on my mysterious places on my body from the heat. So.
We looked at your OkCupid profile, buddy. I don't know how there is any chance you could pick up a woman with a profile like that. How many times did you drop the F-bomb in your profile?
It's how I live. It's with that you try to get someone specific who suits you, and my profile, what I've tried to do is kind of be open to everything to
apparently
improve my chances. Yeah.
Apparently.
So
all right.
Yeah, it is what it is.
All right, so obviously there was a lot of football news with the draft. There is every year, but it was a particularly interesting draft this year, I thought. But just before we get into the offseason news and notes, just a reminder, if you are a fantasy football fan, you're a good person. Just remember that. Don't listen to Gray. If you like fantasy football, you got your stuff together. And of course, Jay, you and I will be doing the tour this summer when we hit the road on August the 4th in Seattle. You and I are going to do 32 fantasy football drafts, 32 straight days, all 32 NFL cities. Basically, we're driving around the United States of America. We're going to do 10,000 miles. We're going to come, shake hands, and kiss babies, and also drink a lot of booze with you. That sound good?
It sounds great. In fact, speaking of Arizona, I'm planning to have my papers ready when I visit that state. So. I mean, you have to admit, I've had people come up to me in bars. I mean, and my friends say, I look Hispanic. That's like the closest that they come to. I mean, I've had people randomly come up to me and say that I look like I'm from Alaska, which is, I was like, isn't that mean I look American? I mean, it's still America, right? Or maybe they meant Eskimo. I don't know. But
yeah.
the closest thing people describe me as Hispanic, so hopefully they don't kick me to Mexico because I wouldn't survive. I don't speak the language.
I don't, even if you spoke the language, I don't know that you'd survive. I don't know that they're big into emo in Mexico.
Yeah. Hopefully you're wide enough to offset the balance. So.
No, but that's going to be fun. If you don't have your tour tickets yet, of course, they're $15. Gets you your first 2 drinks. We are doing all 32 NFL cities in the U.S., and I'll have the link up here next time we talk football, but you can just Google Razzball Tour. You can get the link there to the tickets. They're going quick in a lot of cities, particularly the big ones, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco. Hey, Jacksonville, get out and buy your tickets. That's all I'm saying. Jacksonville, I'm looking at you, buddy. There's a reason you can't support an NFL team. All right. But
is there even enough people in Jacksonville?
The tour
we
is
won 100, right?
Yeah, I know.
It's a population of 7, so the math.
It's the largest city based on land mass in the U.S., isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Florida's its own category, so who knows?
Yeah. Well, listen, the options for me were Florida or Arizona, and I picked Arizona. So,
yeah.
Enough said. I like Florida. I worked there for 7 years. Okay, so you want to talk a little fantasy football, or are we just going to keep jabbering here and have John, the commenter, say, hey, it was 5 minutes before you started talking fantasy football?
I find him interesting because
I'm sorry, like John. I just had to take a dig at you, buddy.
Well, the funny thing is, it's like he's never heard the podcast before. I mean, I've seen Gray go on diatribes that last longer than the entire podcast, and no fantasy baseball has been discussed at times. So
listen,
I mean, this is what we do. So either you like it or you don't. So
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
we're not trying to be like everyone else. And you know what? People love Gray's shenanigans. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, you can't argue with a winner. All right, little fantasy football news and notes. What's happened in the offseason? So let's start with some quick hits here, guys, that could be fantasy relevant going into this year. Jay, talk to me about Noshawn Marino going to the Dolphins. I'm curious what your thoughts are there. Obviously, he had a great season with Denver. I'm sure it didn't hurt that the passing game there was so spectacular. Offensive line before Clady got hurt, also pretty good. But Noshawn Marino going to the Dolphins, and that's a leaky offensive line. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it basically ends Lamar Miller's fantasy relevance, which, haha, my bad. He actually had no fantasy relevance, but I know he's a favorite of yours. But
Was.
yeah, it was.
Was.
And I know Gilpin, he always rags on us for not being high on Marino. And actually, I think we have a good reason now to really not like him this upcoming season. I mean, you said it right in your intro of him. It's, going from Denver to Miami. I mean, basically, my two-word answer to can Marino, have another 1,000-yard season is Ryan Tannehill. It's all up to him, and really, you don't want to bet on that. So, I just don't see much there. Maybe a flex option at this point.
For the record, when we did our mock draft in the last Razzball football podcast of last year,
Yeah.
he did take Noshawn Marino in the first round. Let the record show. I may have to go back and get the old tape on that, but I don't think anyone's going to fight me on that. He took Marino in the first round.
And I wouldn't even
What's
do
the matter
that.
for you, JB? What's the matter for you?
I wouldn't even do that if he remained on Denver's team either, as a first round back. If he stayed with Denver, maybe third round, maybe a low second, but
Right.
he doesn't have that ceiling. So.
And I'm telling you, that is a messy offensive line. You mentioned Tannehill, but that's a rough line. I don't even know if Noshawn might be a bye week replacement as far as I'm concerned. Plus, too, I mean, look, the guy was healthy for the first time, since Jesus was a corporal. But, I mean, that guy's had knee problems. He's always been hurt. I think he just stayed healthy last year and had a good year because of it. So I'm not touching Marino with a 10-foot pole. Next up on the list, we got Maurice Jones-Drew goes from the Jaguars. Hey, Jacksonville, I'm looking at you again, buddy. All the way to Oakland, which is like, you kind of feel for MJD. Spends his whole career with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then he goes to Oakland. I mean, if I was MJD, yeah, you've made money in your career. Go be the second string runner or complimentary runner in New England or Denver. Or why Oakland, man?
Well, actually, I think he grew up in Oakland. I think is what it is. How he survived, I have no idea. I think everybody who grows up in Oakland either moves or dies. So.
Also, too, Maurice Jones-Drew is a big fantasy football player, so I'm curious to see where he would draft himself on that team.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's Oakland, the change of scenery is good. We obviously won't see him averaging, like 900 carries that he's done. For the last couple, from 2009 to 2011, which was his banner years. But yeah, foot and ankle injuries. Previously, he's old. But if he can have health, a running back too. But I just think there's too much risk there. I don't think I'll touch him in any drafts this season.
And the Raiders didn't have a terrible draft by any stretch. I mean, they lucked into the Khalil Mack pick. There they were lucky, not good. Made a smart pick there, and then they picked up David Carr in the second round, who's an interesting prospect. I actually like David Carr quite a bit. I was hoping actually he might go to the Cardinals in the first round, but now that I'm a Cardinals fan, how do you like them apples?
I was actually hoping the Carr would go to the Texans. It would close the loop.
Oh my gosh, they couldn't draft him. It just wouldn't have been an option.
Yeah.
Okay, so Maurice Jones-Drew, you're thinking an RB2 this year? That's realistic?
I could see it. I mean, I won't touch him though. It's just too much risk for me. So I'm risk adverse, I guess, at running back position. So
okay, fair enough. Another guy that was an interesting move because, in Buffalo, obviously C.J. Spiller, when he is healthy, is very dynamic. They've added a lot of skill player weapons, especially getting Sammy Watkins in the draft. We'll get to him a little bit later. But there's an emerging, cache of pass catchers there. As well as, again, I mentioned him a few times, but I'm an E.J. Manuel believer. I think he's a very nice quarterback going forward. I think there's a lot of upside there. But Bryce Brown Bryce Brown goes to the Bills. They've got Fred Jackson. They've got C.J. Spiller. Bryce Brown might be the most dynamic back who's not getting regular reps, and it's because, I mean, the guy's got butterfingers. Is he going to have any relevance whatsoever to Buffalo? Is it the type of thing if one of the two other running backs gets hurt, maybe he gets some burn? But do you see any situation where Bryce Brown is startable other than a bye week this year?
Yeah, that's exactly how you described it. I think they just brought him in as depth. I think they know what they have because Spiller, he did, play in 15 games, but he was out in and out with, minor injuries. And obviously the hype train on him has not reached the station yet to pick him up.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah, and Fred Jackson is stable. He has missed, I think it was something like 12 games in the last 3 years. But yeah, Bryce Brown is irrelevant as of now, unless there's an injury. So, I mean, they have a tandem that works. So,
All right, fair enough. Another interesting move that happened at the draft, and I think it's because he is fantasy relevant, probably a wide receiver too in this new situation, is Stevie Johnson going to the 49ers. I was a little bit surprised that Buffalo let him go. I guess they really like Robert Woods. What do you think about Stevie going to the 49ers, who always seem to be in need of someone to go and catch the ball? And, he's a great possession receiver.
He is. The thing is, though, I rarely want wide receivers on the 49ers. It's just there's not enough targets to go around. It's pretty much Vernon Davis, all the time over there. Kaepernick, the targets are just ridiculously low. So I don't like any receivers on that team. I could see Stevie Johnson as he is a wide receiver too, I think. But, I think he's going to be unstable. I think, the targets will really limit his value in certain weeks. I just don't think it's going to be there enough for him to I think it'll just fluctuate too much. I just don't want any part of that wide receiver core.
Someone's going to catch the ball, though. Whether Crabtree gets healthy and can put together a consistent season. Vernon Davis, to me, is overrated. Not overrated. He's a good skill guy, but at the end of the day, someone is going to have to catch the ball there. The running game is still obviously very deep. Frank Gore's got, I don't know how much tread left on those tires. They also drafted Carlos. I'm going to start calling him Carlos Hype from the Ohio State University. We'll get to him a little bit later. So there's a lot of options there, but I think there's an opportunity that Stevie Johnson could have some relevance more than, bye week, possibly wide receiver 3, maybe a flex option. What do you think about that? Am I crazy?
No, you're not. I could see it, but I can't bank on it. I think that's where my feelings are. I won't. I think on paper it's a good move. He goes to a better team, he goes to a better situation, he goes to a better quarterback. But I'm still worried about the amount of targets. That's my big red flag there. So because I've only mentioned it like 80 times.
Yeah,
so.
I know. Another interesting story is Deshaun Jackson going to the Redskins. That could be interesting for a ton of reasons. Look, obviously the Redskins arguably didn't have a very good draft because, they've given up their first-round pick for the next couple of years. But a healthy RG3, if he's back, he was rushed too soon to get back into the action last year. If he's healthy this year, I still think he could be a star in the NFL. Obviously, he's got that kind of upside. Pierre Garçon has obviously emerged as a top option there. So now you've got RG3 chuck into Garçon and to Deshaun Jackson. What's your take on the situation?
I love the situation for a lot of reasons. First of all, I thought it was kind of ridiculous that the Eagles got rid of him, especially for the reasons that they did. I know he's not the most beloved receiver there, but you really don't get rid of receivers who are coming off career years. It's kind of strange. And the thing is, I sometimes
they didn't like him. It's in an NFL locker room, you got a lot of guys there, but at the same time. Obviously, they thought he was, such a, negative addition to the team that they were willing to basically let him walk, and now he's with a divisional rival.
Yeah, and that still kind of confuses me because they have Riley Cooper. So I guess the moral of the story is you can say the word, but you can't be the word.
Oh.
So I'm just saying it does not look good on that aspect. We're kind of delving off the fantasy side of it, but Also, Riley Cooper is a little overrated this year, by the way. But for the Redskins, the situation is great, mainly because of Jay Gruden. Obviously he loves the vertical game. Just look at the numbers he was able to squeeze out of Andy Dalton. Despite his ginger likeness. I think a lot of people say that Deshaun Jackson will kind of siphon off from each other with Garcon. And I don't think so. I think there's enough targets there to keep the value the same. And obviously RG3's value goes up. I mean, just another weapon for him. And if he's healthy, I could see him as a QB. You know, before this, he was probably a QB 15, but now he's knocking on the top 10 door. I think if you're kind of ranking him out, he might be 11 or 12. I think it makes a big difference for him.
I think once they get to camp, RG3, if he looks healthy, he could shoot up the board. There's no doubt in my mind he could easily be a top 5 QB this year. I mean, obviously things have to go right, but he's got 2 wide receivers who could catch 60 to 70 balls, but with massive yards after the catch numbers. So it's going to be really interesting to watch how that offense plays out this year.
Right. I mean, and just to add, the Bears did just fine with 2 elite guys there. So I think we can see a situation like this happening, especially with Jay Gruden.
Yeah, but Mark Trestman thought he was in the Canadian Football League again. I mean, he just let it rip.
Yeah, it was great watching though.
All right, so the New York Jets had some interesting names. Obviously, 2 guys kind of way beyond their prime, but at the same time, I'm not really sure right now how to evaluate either of these guys. So give me your take first on Chris Johnson and then Mike Vick, both going to the New York Jets.
Yeah, I think the Jets' pursuit of creating the best 2009 team has been a success. So I think it's looked great so far. If only we could travel back in time and watch them. Yeah, with CJ 2K going there, he's obviously going to split time with Ivory. I think it'll, hopefully they utilize him a little bit better than Tennessee. I mean, he's obviously used much better in space, and I'm not even a coach, so just throw him the ball out there. Let him use.
Yeah, but there was no one else Tennessee had as options
right.
last year. It was kind of, they didn't have a choice in how they used them. And I mean, that was a good line. I mean, the line in New York is okay, but it was still a pretty good line in Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I think his value is kind of unchanged, and I don't even know who's going to be feeding him the ball, if it's going to be Geno Smith or Michael Vick. But if we're going by that logic, then Michael Vick will probably get injured by week 3 to 5, and it'll be Geno Smith. So, I mean, he's not an elite back anymore. That's pretty clear. But he didn't do badly last year. I think based on where he was drafted, he gave value. It wasn't the best we've seen. We were kind of spoiled by him, a few seasons ago. And if you get dreamy, yeah, you could. If they used him like Reggie Bush, you could see him kind of do that. But I can't bet on it. It's the Jets, and it's kind of an unknown situation.
I wouldn't be shocked if Chris Johnson had one more really big season out of him, like maybe 1,500 combined yards and maybe even double-digit in touchdowns. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. I think there's maybe a 25% chance of it happening. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to kind of watch that play out. Over to Cleveland now, and it was really exciting when Johnny Manziel got drafted by Cleveland, because A, he's going to be very interesting to watch. B, it's a very, very, very good offensive line, arguably maybe the most underrated offensive line in the league. They picked up Ben Tate, who's hurt a lot, but obviously it'd be interesting to watch him. And I thought, okay, Manziel's going to be able to throw the ball to Cameron and to Josh Gordon. And now it looks like Josh Gordon potentially might miss somewhere between 8 and 16 games for failing allegedly another drug test, which is a bummer, because he was fun to watch, led the league in receiving yards last year. What are your thoughts on Josh Gordon?
Yeah, I touched upon this on a post, and I was actually going to rank him. I was thinking about it. I wasn't for sure, but I was maybe going to rank him ahead of Calvin Johnson this season for the rankings. I was thinking about it. Yeah.
Jay, you can't be like the football editor for Razzball and make wild and outrageous statements like that.
Well, Sky was able to rank Doug Martin number 1, and he kept his job for. Oh wait, never mind. No, I thought about it. I think there was a small case to be made, but obviously it's moot. I mean, I thought it was stranger that the Cleveland ownership and general manager knew that he had this failed drug test over his head 2 weeks ago, and yet they still went ahead with the draft, and they basically omitted. I mean, they didn't go after Sammy Watkins. He was right there for the taking for them, and they skipped him, which is kind of strange. But It's unfortunate. I guess the only silver lining is it didn't happen during the season. It might have really destroyed some teams. I mean, when you lose a first round pick, like Gordon probably would have been, or maybe second round, it can kill a season. But it's unfortunate. He has a history of this too. So
Yeah,
uh,
he missed. I mean, don't forget he missed the first two games last year and still had 1,600 plus yards.
right. And so in dynasty leagues or for next season, he's risky now just because he can't get his.
Risky,
Yeah.
risky. I mean, he's on the same list almost as Justin Blackman.
Yeah, yeah, honestly, and so it's unfortunate. I mean, I had some high hopes for him this year, even with Cleveland. So,
No,
the factory of sadness keeps on, manufacturing.
I am sad.
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah,
sad. It's kind of like the football equivalent of Jose Fernandez probably needing Tommy John. I had Josh Gordon everywhere last year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just sad to see. I mean, as far as fantasy goes, I mean, it's just unfortunate, both in real football and fantasy football. But it's not like he got injured. It's something that he did. I mean, I understand. I'm totally not against smoking the green. I mean, you know this about me. It's totally fine. But I mean, if you're a football star, there are some certain sacrifices that you should maybe make for the betterment of yourself and your career. These are not big sacrifices. You can do ninja training. It's not hard.
We should point out that when Jay says he lives in Washington, it's the state of Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live there, and it's beautiful, and
You
even more
still
beautiful
do.
now. Yeah. All right.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft. Obviously, tons of interesting storylines. I mean, it was a really fun draft to watch this year. Biggest surprise early to me, because I didn't think Johnny Manziel was going to go in the top 3 picks. Blake Bortles going to the Jaguars, which is interesting. He can run a little bit. He actually scored quite a few touchdowns on the ground. Big guy, pocket passer. Obviously, Jacksonville's trying to build something there. And look, he's a big prototypical quarterback. The only question is his arm strength. I mean, I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant going into year one by any stretch of the imagination, especially with Henny there. But if you're talking keeper or dynasty, what's your take on Blake Bortles?
I mean, first of all, I had to figure out what a Blake Bortles was. It sounded like a German cereal from Mars or something. But I actually I looked up his ethnicity and I couldn't find it because I was wondering where Bortles comes from. But I'm just gonna assume it's from Pluto. So
It sounds Dutch.
yeah.
Thank you, well.
But yeah, you're right. He's huge. He's mobile. He has really good accuracy. But the only worry I have is this is the same way they described Blaine Gabbert to us. And I hate to bring up that name, and I'm not sure. Obviously if it's going to happen, but in a dynasty league, yeah, I mean they're treating him correctly. They've already said they're going to have him sit the year. That Henny's the guy,
Right.
and he's going to have a lot of weapons ready for next season. They're going to get out. Because everyone knows receivers have the toughest curve next to quarterbacks for first year play.
Well, you
And
can
so
argue that. You can argue that now because I think the systems they're playing in college translate a lot closer, and I think there's a lot more opportunities. Especially with how the NFL are running their offenses with a lot of screens and stuff that wide receivers have potential to be fantasy relevant year one. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I mean Keenan Allen did it just fine last season, but
You had to get
there
a
is
Charger
curve.
in there, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to. What else am I going to talk about? No, in a dynasty league, yeah, I kind of like Bridgewater better. I know we're going to get to him later, but Bordeaux seems like he could be a stable guy, and there's value in that. So.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I will say, if you are a Jaguars fan or Jaguars, whatever you want, I like what the regime is doing there. The picks have been very smart. So when I saw them take Bortles, the only question I really had was, okay, so that's their guy, and that's who they believe is the best QB prospect, and that's the position they're trying to address. But I mean, he could have dropped down a couple slots. They could have made that trade with Buffalo, and still got Bortles at number 9. I would assume
Right.
unless they thought Cleveland was going to snag him, but I don't know. That was a surprising move to me.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Cleveland was either going to go Bridgewater or eventually they went Manziel. But with Bortles, they based it off their own analytics. They're running advanced analytics up there, and they based it on their college performance. And, the way they valued him, I don't understand why they didn't take him later, and try to, get
So you're saying it
max.
had nothing to do with hey, let's get the University of Central Florida guy here up at the Northern Florida so we can sell
Yeah,
tickets. Is that the analytics they're using?
Yeah, that's probably a little bit. I mean, yeah, that will make them a little bit money, but they didn't have to take him at 3. They didn't have to, but hey, if it works out, nobody cares. So
Yeah, fair enough. Now, here was a trade that was interesting, and yeah, I love it for Buffalo. They move up to get Sammy Watkins, make the trade with Cleveland. Great deal as far as I'm concerned. I mean, look, they give up a first next year and a fourth, which is, listen, it's a heavy price to pay, but if that regime, doesn't make something happen now, if they can't move the dial this year, I mean, they might not be there to kind of have to pay on that trade. But Sammy Watkins, dynamic, exciting. I mean, if you're doing a rookie draft in a dynasty league, he's got to be the first pick off the clock. The only concern I would have is that he's going to Buffalo, where the weather isn't always great. But I have no problem with EJ Manuel throwing the ball to him. What's your thoughts on Sammy Watkins? How good can he be, and B, how quickly will his game translate to being fantasy relevant?
yeah, I mean, it depends if EJ Manuel can actually get the ball to him. I mean, if he overthrows him by 20 yards, there's nothing much that Watkins can do. But
Watkins has a big catch radius. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, there's not much not to like with him. He's an imposing force. He has that home run ability. He can take a short pass and burn DBs. I mean, it's a little too easy, but you can really comp him to Julio Jones really easily.
That's what I was thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, especially even how he was selected at the draft. I mean, this worked out for Atlanta, but of course the dynamic there is Matt Ryan is a capable quarterback, and EJ Manuel has yet to achieve that. I think the Bills have put all their eggs in his basket, so. It'll rest on EJ Manuel's shoulders. If he has a good year this year, I think Watkins is very fantasy relevant. But if EJ Manuel takes a step back, then that pretty much drags the entire team down with him.
Right.
So I mean, it's all up to him. But Watkins has that ability.
The hype during this draft obviously had to do with Johnny Manziel. I heard you say Manziel. It looks like it should be pronounced Manziel. It looks like it may back in the day have been like Manzielli. But let's just call him Johnny Football. So Johnny Manziel, obviously Cleveland moves up into the first round again at the 22 pick to get Johnny Football. And it's interesting, they took Brady Quinn there, and they took Whedon there a couple of years ago. So that particular slot with Cleveland quarterbacks hasn't really worked out well for them. But obviously, Manziel is interesting. He could be a boom. He could be a bust. I think him joining up with Kyle Shanahan may have been one of the best things possible for him. And obviously losing Josh Gordon, I mean, look, even if he's not suspended for the whole year, who knows if he might be done with the organization. So here we go, the $1 million question. What's Johnny Football going to do?
Yeah, and you're right. I did mispronounce his name. I prefer his nickname, like you said, Johnny Clipboard. So, no, I think he gets a little unfairly ragged on sometimes, but I sometimes get annoyed that the media has, just has a thing for him. It kind of, especially at the draft. I mean, we had to watch him so many times. Although the bright side was he was in front of that Chargers logo, so I really enjoyed seeing the Chargers. It was like a subliminal message to everyone. But yeah, the situation is bad. It's Cleveland, so his year one value is close to nothing. I mean, they're already talking about him. Just being on the bench the entire year, like he better get used to it. Like they're tough talking him in the press already for some reason, like an angry parent. Which is
they didn't handle that well. I mean, he could have pumped up the guy's tires a little bit more than that. I mean, I understand they're trying to kind of, hey, listen, this is going to work in blue collar Cleveland, but at the same time, there's better ways to handle that. That owner in Cleveland is interesting. He might be a Jerry Jones clone.
Yeah, well, and it also reminds me of how the Nationals kind of treat Bryce Harper. It's like they don't want him on the team. I mean, there are 29 other teams who would take Bryce Harper in a heartbeat. I don't understand why he gets treated the way he does by his own organization. And so I kind of, that's how I felt when they were already parenting Manziel. And I mean, going back to him, he does have interesting skills. Any mobile quarterback is interesting in fantasy. He seems to have a good idea of the pocket. These are skills that you really can't teach. You can't teach speed, you can't teach awareness. And so and he has that bravado, which can help a guy. It can hurt a guy too. Case in point, Tony Romo. But The things you have to remember too is he was able to do these things at Texas A&M, which he had two elite tackles protecting him, and he had the best receiver in the nation, at least I think, to throw to. So those are things you have to keep in mind.
Well,
Year
you can
two,
argue though, and listen, I like Mike Evans going to Tampa Bay. Obviously, I think he's a Vincent Jackson type of wide receiver. But you can argue that, hey, who made who? The wide receiver made the quarterback, or vice versa?
yeah, I mean it's one of those
Just
things.
saying.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's definitely. I like Manziel, but he's a risk. If a dynasty is drafting today for QBs, I'd probably still go with Bridgewater. I like his situation better. I know we're going to get to him, but
No, let's segue right
you know,
into it. Talk to me
yeah,
about Bridgewater.
yeah. I mean, he's not mobile. I mean, he's not really a running quarterback, but he does have speed and athleticism, so he will take advantage. I kind of see him as an Andrew Luck when it comes to the legs. Not really a guy
Okay,
who.
I'm glad you you quantified that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just he seems polished. I like quarterback prospects that are the most polished. And the Minnesota situation seems like a good one. They're going to be building around him. They got the new stadium there, so they're probably going to coincide that with that. And he has good. I mean, he's above average across the board. That's mainly why I like him. He's just the most stable, and I probably said that a couple times with my past blurbs. But that's what I like most.
You know what? I'm interested to see what Bridgewater does because I mean he was kind of the consensus number one pick, for the last year before the season happened, and then he got they kind of picked him apart, didn't have a good pro day. I'm really curious to see what he does there. You still got pretty good offensive line. You got Adrian Peterson carrying the rock. And you've got Cordarrelle Patterson, who looks like he could be a freak. I mean, if he can learn to run routes, there's some other weapons there too. So I'm curious to see what Bridgewater does. Let's do just some real quick hits here, Jay, on some of the other guys that were drafted who are going to be obviously very fantasy relevant, just for the sake of time. Love seeing Eric Ebron going to Detroit. I mean, man, you got CJ taking the top off the defense. You got Reggie Bush as a safety valve. That opens up a lot of space for this kid, and he can catch. So I'm really interested to see what Ebron can do in Detroit.
Yeah, I was. I mean, you're telling me that they have the number one weapon in the NFL and they still need more, which is crazy. But Stafford's a lucky guy. What can I say? I mean, he's really going to be trouble for the middle phase of defenses, and I love the situation there. I think he's fantasy relevant this season.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what Detroit is trying to do because their secondary is so porous is they're trying to do the old Indianapolis Colts model.
Yeah.
Let's chuck up a lot of points and build up the defensive line. Next up, Brandon Cooks. New Orleans moves up to go get him. He's interesting, too. He's quite polished, and, I think he actually, don't quote me on this, but I believe he led college or the NCAA or Division I anyway in receiving yards last year. They moved up to get him. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I think he's another guy who can kind of take the top off the defense. He fantasy relevant this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right now, all Drew Brees has is basically Kenny Stills and the ghost of Marquis Colson, And so...
Well, and Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham, of course. But I really like Cooks. I really like him this season. I think he can be a wide receiver 3. I mean, he's very physical. That's what I love about him. He's like a Steve Smith. I mean, I don't want to say he has a ceiling of Steve Smith, but he's like that type of receiver who doesn't really necessarily burn you, but he can separate just from his upper body strength.
Yep.
So
that's fair.
I think it's a great system for him to be in.
All right, real quick, we didn't see any running backs go till the second round. We're going to cover 3 of them really fast here. Carlos Hyde. I don't know that he's going to get a lot of burn in San Francisco just because of the depth there. I think LaMichael James is probably on his way out in San Francisco. He's never really developed. Frank Gore could go at any time, but right now he's still there. But Hyde's interesting. I mean, he's a big kind of bruising back, and I think long-term he'll fit in really well to that offense. He might be after Sammy Watkins, the top Dynasty League pick this year if you need a running back. But what are your thoughts real quick on Carlos Hyde?
Yeah, I think he could end up being Gore 2.0. I think his relevance this season depends on if Lattimore comes back okay from his recovery. But I think
I'm not counting on Lattimore in any way.
Yeah, I'm not
shape, or
either.
form.
But I've seen crazier things. But I mean, I think with Hyde entering the mix, I think that kind of brings the line, the median spread of points down for that entire tandem. So I think it kind of hurts everyone's value.
Nope, fair enough. Sankey goes. He was the first actual running back taken. He goes to Tennessee. Not the fastest guy out there, but very versatile. Good offensive line in Tennessee. He's the guy who could, if there's one running back that could come out and be the workhorse this year for a team, it could be Sankey going to the Titans.
Yeah, I love Sankey. I think Hunt might use him as, kind of like how he used Danny Woodhead with the Chargers. Another Chargers drop. But, the problem with Sankey is I think he's actually going to be overrated. I think he's going to be like this year's Eddie Lacy. I mean, not overrated, but really the price will go up. Like I think by the time draft rolls around, you'll see him go in like the third or fourth round just because of the Tennessee situation where I would probably see him as kind of like a fifth rounder flex or something. So, but I like him. I love the situation. I think
I don't think he'll get drafted much higher than that. I mean, well, listen, we never know, but he was interesting. I mean, T-Hole was on a couple weeks ago when we were talking before the draft, and he was gushing about Sankey. And listen, T-Hole, we love making fun of you, but listen, T-Hole knows his football, and he watched a lot of Sankey games because he's out in Washington. Oh, as are you. And then the last guy we're talking about real quick here, Trey Mason goes to St. Louis. That's kind of interesting because I still think, I've said this a lot, but I still think St. Louis on both sides of the ball is just building a team full of playmakers. There's a lot of skill there. I'm not buying Sam Bradford, but another year of experience for Tavon Austin and his name is escaping me, the running back who emerged last year for St. Louis. Stacy, thank you, Zach Stacy. Mason could be a nice complimentary back to him, and Stacy could. Mason. I talked about this when Jess Root was in studio with us last week. I think Mason has a little bit of Andre Ellington in him, so I think he's an interesting guy to watch as well.
Yeah, I don't think he's fantasy relevant this year just because he seems more like he's a little raw. He seems like kind of a project because he still doesn't do his third read down or his third down reads very well. He doesn't pick up the blitz packages. He's kind of like Donald Brown on third down. He doesn't know what's going on. But the thing is, he has that. He has the good instincts. The elusiveness. And if anything, I think his ceiling this year is he's basically going to replace what Isaiah P did last season.
Or didn't do.
Yeah, or didn't do pretty much. Yeah. So I don't think Stacy's value changed. Actually, I think Stacy's value goes up because they drafted that Robinson offensive tackle guy. So I think Stacy's going to have a good year this year.
Yeah, I don't. Robinson needs some work, but he's a mauler. I mean, he is built for the run game. He's not a typical left tackle, and who knows? He might actually wind up being a guard in that offensive line. But man, is he a mauler? One thing I will say about Trey Mason though, and I know he was behind a good offensive line at Auburn. He was SEC Player of the Year. For a running back to do that in that conference is impressive. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out on Trey Mason.
Yeah, one thing I will say about T-Hole is he is a beautiful man. He is a beautiful man. That was the first time I saw him, and when you're discussing what he looked like, I thought the first thing that came to mind. Have you seen Captain America? I'm not sure if Canadians are allowed to watch American movies.
What are you talking about? I'm American now.
Is it called Captain America A in Canada? Is that the no? I mean, you've seen it though, right? Chris Evans as Captain America.
No, I haven't seen it, but
okay.
I think I've seen the trailer.
Yeah, I mean, for those who've seen it, Chris Evans, it kind of looks like Chris Evans is what T-Hole looks like. That's who he looks like. Chris Evans, I think. Maybe with AIDS. I'm not sure though.
Oh, dude.
He's so
that's it for Jay. Jay's gone. Jay's out of here. Thanks for joining us on Razzball Radio today. It's fun talking football this time of year. Yeah. On tomorrow's show on Wednesday, we're going to have Gray back. So again, Gray's here Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Next week, we got some great guests lined up as well, including Mike Michaels, who'll be joining us for the first time. Rudy's going to be out here starting next week. And, of course, the rest of the Razzball characters. So whether you're into football, baseball, I mean, look, it's going to be baseball heavy for the rest of the year, obviously. But as football starts getting close, also, don't forget, guys, get your Razzball 32 and 32 and 32. 32 fantasy football drafts, 32 straight days, all 32 NFL cities. Get your tickets. It's $15. There's only 100 per city. And trust me, guys, this is going to be fun. It's going to be an event. I'm actually working with Guilt City, which is a great company. We got some really exciting things planned. So get your tickets. Again, there's only 100. A few cities are getting close to topping out there again, especially some on the East Coast. So if you're coming out to join us, and again, I got to get the link on this, but you can either go to Razzball Radio. It's right at the top banner, or you can just Google Razzball Tour and they'll come up right there. Get your tickets. $15. You can't beat it. Right, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, who cares about football? Just come out and have a beer with us.
Exactly, man. You can see who's taller, me or Jay.
Yeah. Probably you.
Probably.
Unless I bring my ladder. So.
All right, Jay. Thanks for joining us today on the Razzball, Razzball Radio. We'll also cut this out as a football podcast. It'll be available too. Thanks, Razzballers. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day.